You might think a massive car company and your tiny local coffee shop have absolutely nothing in common. But what if I told you they're both playing by the exact same secret rulebook? Well, they are. And the goal is always the same: maximize profit. Today, we're going to open up that playbook, and honestly, it's going to change the way you look at every single business out there.
So let's start with that. A huge auto plant churning out thousands of cars, and a little sandwich cart on a street corner. On the surface, worlds apart, right? But underneath all the noise, they are driven by the exact same economic logic. And understanding that logic isn't just for Wall Street bigwigs, it's the key to figuring out how our entire economy really works.
Because here's the thing. Every single business, no matter what it sells, boils down to this one simple process. It takes inputs, things like steel and labor for a car, or bread and veggies for a sandwich, and it transforms them into outputs that you and I want to buy. That whole transformation process is called production, and it is the engine at the very heart of any company you can think of.
Now, every business owner, every single day, is trying to solve a three-part puzzle. And these aren't decisions you make once and then you're done. Nope, it's a constant juggling act to stay ahead of the game and, actually make some money.
So here's the puzzle. First, how much stuff are we actually going to make? 1,000 cars this month? Or maybe 1,200? Second, how are we going to make it? Do we use more robots or more people on the assembly line? And third, what ingredients do we need to pull it off? How much steel? How many computer chips? How many work hours? You can already see how they're all tangled together, right? You can't decide how much steel to buy if you don't know how many cars you're making. It's like a domino effect.
We all think we know what profit is. It's just revenue minus costs. Simple, right? Well, what if that's not the whole story? Because the way an economist looks at profit is totally different from how an accountant sees it. And understanding that difference, that's the secret to making genuinely smart business decisions.
The key word here, the one that changes everything, is economic. Economic profit is your total revenue minus your total economic cost. Which of course begs the question, what on earth are economic costs? Because they include all the money you actually spend, plus all the money you could have made doing something else.
So on one side, you've got your accounting costs. These are the obvious ones, the explicit, out-of-pocket expenses you write checks for, your rent, your payroll, the raw materials. But economic costs, they go so much deeper. They include all of that, plus these invisible but incredibly powerful things called opportunity costs. Opportunity cost is basically the value of the path not taken. It's the what-if cost that's hiding behind every choice you make.
For most businesses, the biggest, most important opportunity cost is their capital. Think about it. When you invest your money into a building or equipment for your business, that money is now stuck there. It can't be anywhere else. It could have been sitting in a super safe government bond earning interest, or maybe growing in the stock market. That potential return you gave up is a very, very real economic cost. Economists call it a normal rate of return, and it's basically the minimum profit you have to make just to justify not putting your money in those other safer places.
All right, let's make this super concrete. Let's say two friends, Sue and Ann, invest 20 grand of their own money into a push cart to sell fancy belts. As you can see, their total revenue is $30,000. Their explicit, out-of-pocket costs for buying the belts and paying someone to work the cart come out to $29,000. Now, an accountant would look at this and say, awesome, you made $1,000 in profit. But an economist would say, whoa, hold on a minute. What about the opportunity cost of that $20,000 they invested? If they could have just earned a simple 10% return on it somewhere else, that's a $2,000 invisible cost. So their total economic cost is actually $31,000.
And that leads to this pretty shocking result. With 30 grand in revenue, but 31 grand in total economic cost, they're actually looking at an economic loss of $1,000. Think about that for a second. Even though their bank account literally has an extra $1,000 in it, they would have been better off, $2,000 better off, in fact, if they had just bought some boring corporate bonds and stayed home. A positive economic profit means you're crushing the alternatives. A negative one means the alternatives are beating you. And that, my friends, is why some businesses that look profitable on paper still end up closing their doors.
Okay, so understanding your true cost is one half of the puzzle. The other half is all about production. How do you actually make your stuff in the most efficient way you can? And this brings us to a universal law that you probably already know from the saying, too many cooks in the kitchen. Let's head back to our little sandwich shop to see exactly how this plays out.
So picture our shop. It's got a fixed size counter and, crucially, just one grill. The first employee, doing everything alone, can make 10 sandwiches an hour. Fine. But add a second worker, and now they can specialize. One person on the hot grill, the other assembling the cold ingredients. Total output jumps way up to 25. Awesome.
But then, look what happens. The third worker only adds 10 more sandwiches. The fourth adds just 5. And that sixth worker, he adds 0. Nothing. He's literally just getting in the way, waiting for his turn at the grill.
This chart right here shows what we call the marginal product of labor. It sounds complicated, but it's just a fancy way of asking, how many extra sandwiches do you get from hiring one more person? And you can see it plain as day. There's this huge peak with that second worker, who adds a massive 15 sandwiches to the total. But by the time you hire the fourth person, they're only adding a measly 5. And the sixth, a big fat 0. The grill is maxed out. This pattern isn't some weird fluke, it's a fundamental law of production.
And this whole phenomenon has a name, the law of diminishing returns. The key thing to get here is that this doesn't happen because your new workers are lazy or bad at their jobs. We assume they're all rock stars. The problem is a fixed input, in this case, that one single grill. Each new worker has less grill space and counter space to work with than the person who came before them. Eventually, you hit a bottleneck, and productivity for each new person just tanks. This is a challenge every business faces in the short run.
Okay, so a firm gets its production limits, it knows about diminishing returns. The next piece of the puzzle is deciding how to produce. And this almost always comes down to a classic showdown. Do we use more people, or do we use more machines?
You've basically got two options on the menu. A labor-intensive technology uses a whole bunch of people and not much equipment. Think of artisans hand-stitching leather shoes. Then you have capital-intensive technology, which uses a ton of expensive machinery and very few people. Think of a modern automated car factory. Now, the best choice isn't always obvious. In fact, it depends entirely on the cost.
Let's look at this diaper factory. It's got 5 different ways to make 100 diapers, ranging from technology A, which is mostly people, to technology E, which is almost all machines. Now check this out. When labor is super cheap, just $1 per unit, technology C, a nice balance, is the clear winner at only $8. But watch what happens when wages suddenly jump to $5. All of a sudden, the cheapest method completely flips to technology E, the most automated, machine-heavy option. This shows that the best technology isn't set in stone. It's a moving target that shifts every time the cost of labor or capital changes.
And this isn't just some textbook theory. This kind of calculation happens in the real world every single day. Take a trucking company. For every single trip, the driver has to choose a technology. They can drive fast, which saves money on the driver's hourly wage but burns a lot more fuel. Or they can drive slow, saving on fuel but costing more in labor time. So, which one is the profit-maximizing choice?
Well, the answer, just like with our diapers, depends entirely on the price of the inputs. You can see it right here. When fuel is cheap, at $3.50 a gallon, driving fast costs less overall. It makes sense to burn more fuel to save on that expensive labor cost. But when fuel gets pricey, up at $4.50 a gallon, the whole logic flips. Now it's actually cheaper to drive slow. A truly profit-maximizing firm is constantly doing this math, adapting its technology to every little change in cost.
So we've looked at how firms figure out their output, their technology, and their inputs. But all of these decisions get filtered through one last, super important lens, the lens of time. Because what's best for the business today isn't always what's best for its future.
Economists basically split time into 2 horizons. You've got the short run, which is the here and now. You're working with what you've got, that one sandwich grill, a factory of a certain size. Short-run decisions, like how many people to hire for the lunch rush, are all about optimizing within your current limits. The long run, though, that's the strategic view where nothing is fixed. You can decide to build a bigger kitchen, install 3 more grills, or even invent a whole new kind of sandwich. It's about planning for a fundamentally different future.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? All of these big business decisions, from figuring out your real profit to choosing your technology, all hinge on understanding trade-offs and opportunity cost. So I'll just leave you with this one question to bring it all home. What is the opportunity cost of the time you are spending right now listening to this? What's the next best thing you could be doing? Thinking that way, well, it doesn't just make you a better economist, it helps you make better decisions in every single part of your life.